All right, everyone, welcome to your next episode, your fix of sugar for your intellects. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Eduardo, one of your co-hosts, and I'm here with Romero R-O-O-O-O-O. ¿Cómo estamos, Romero?
Pretty good, pretty good. Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is. Isn't
Oh,
that.
yes.
It says reintroduce, right?
Yeah, I reintroduced myself. That was JC for the hip hop heads out there. And I'm great. And I know last week, on one of the previous episodes, you were able to get my Biggie reference, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
Herrero.
But I don't know if you should feel good about that. It just means that we're in the same age group.
Hey, that's important.
No, it
That's how
is.
we define demographics and experiences.
Yeah, but you would be amazed at how many references we don't get anymore, or how many references people don't understand anymore, like the younger generation.
Yes.
My niece, I don't know what we started talking about anime and about all these other things, and then we started getting into the some of the best memes out there, right? Like the Neo from the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't
They were
know
like,
that
what?
one. Yeah, she didn't know it, and then I was like,
What?
wait, how can you not know? And then she was like, well, that's you guys. That's a different world. We don't know anything about that. How? And then we started getting into that whole discussion about relevance, and then I started finding out that, or I realized that most of the memes that I know that I grew up with, she has no clue, and she's college age right now, so
Mm-hmm.
it's like a 15 to 20 year difference, and yeah, but yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons, they usually define a generation by about 20 years or so. And so yeah, so it sounds like she's part of Generation Z, the last generation, and then after her, uh, the folks will be the Generation Alpha. So it will start all over again in the I can say in español abecedario, in the alphabet. There you go.
She was born in 2001. That's generation Gen Z, you said?
I thought they were.
Let's see. Gen Z starts in the 1990s and the early 2010s. Oh, so she might be an alpha gal.
Interesting.
Well, anyway, I was disappointed and hurt that she didn't know who Bad Luck Brian is. Have you ever seen that meme?
No, actually, I don't think I know who Bad Luck
You've
Brian
never.
is either.
Okay, well then that makes me feel a little bit better than that. It wasn't just. I'm
Well,
sure
let's
you've
see if I
seen.
recognize it. Maybe if I see
Sorry,
it.
you've never
Oh,
seen.
that guy?
Yeah, that's Bad Luck Brian.
Oh, that's
you
funny.
you've
Well,
seen it
I've seen
before.
I've seen some memes, but I didn't know who he was. What
Yeah,
what what show was he in?
I think it's a high school picture. I don't know how it got to the internet, but then people started putting all of these memes on it. I think it's just from a high school picture. I don't know if he was known anywhere outside of this. There's actually, did you know that there's a Know Your Meme page?
I did not know that. Know your meme?
Yep. So Bad Luck Brian is the original instance of the meme was submitted to Reddit by Ian Daves, a longtime friend of Kyle since elementary school, using a yearbook photograph of Kyle with the caption, "Takes driving test, gets first DUI." So that's how it started.
That's funny. So this is the Wikipedia of memes or what?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you didn't know who Bad Luck Brian was because you didn't know the name of it, but you knew this meme because you had seen it.
Yes,
And she says that she had never seen it because I showed her this meme. So anyway, just to wrap up this whole thing, uh, glad that we get each other's references, but that's almost a given.
that's funny. But I like I like how they say memes in Spanish, memes.
Ajá,
Me parece
memes.
más entretenido
Well,
los
in
memes.
Europe and in other countries too, instead of Wi-Fi, it's Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi,
El Wi-Fi.
el Wi-Fi.
Uh-huh.
No, but I think one of the reasons we're talking about these generational or things that define a generation, that define an era, things that people remember. Because as we continue to talk about the coronavirus, the pandemic, and what we're going through. So right now, as many of you know, both California and other states are experiencing a surge in cases. So we're closing back down, and and obviously the pandemic and social, no, not social, physical distancing has started to impact the way that we live our lives. So first news to share, happy to report that I got tested a second time and I'm now negative. So yay,
Yeah.
good for being negative.
Release
But
the
the interesting
confetti.
thing well, go ahead.
Release the confetti.
That's right. That's right. It's funny because I was gonna have a test reveal party and invite you and other friends. So that way I can, hey guys, come to my party and then pop a balloon. I'm negative or
Yeah,
I'm
right.
positive.
Well,
Wouldn't that be funny?
well, I wouldn't be surprised if that is a thing, considering that you told me that you guys are going to a drive-by baby shower.
That's right.
That's a
Drive
thing.
by baby shower. That's a thing now. And it's happened, right? Because it's a way that we as people who like to celebrate important milestones in our lives, whether it's birthdays, graduations. I know there were a lot of drive-by graduation celebrations this past June and summer. Now this is the new thing, the drive-by baby shower. So it will be interesting, right? To be able to both celebrate my sister-in-law and see how people come out and show up and drive by. So yeah, that's one of the small ways, well, small and big ways that the coronavirus, the pandemic, is changing our lives.
Somewhere in East LA, there's a cholo saying, "Finally, I can do a drive-by without getting stigmatized or stereotyped."
That's right. Like, oh, let me get my little bag and pa 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 pa. No, not condoning drive-bys, please. But the other thing about going to Dodger Stadium to get tested is just an amazing operation, right? Because you relate, take me out to the park, to the ball game with a happy times, and actually the times that I've gone to Dodger Stadium, which is in a beautiful place, right? Up in the hills, and on a clear day, you can see how beautiful the city of LA is. But it was just amazing to see the amount of people, the amount of cars, and Californians. I think it's the Disney effect. They just know how to deal with people. They have crowds and crowds, so they had a pretty good system in terms of you register online, you make the appointment, and then you head to the stadium, but you had to know which entrance to get into because if you went to the wrong entrance, it was a long ass line that went all the way to I think to the 101. But if you came out the other way, it was a faster access to the actual parking lot. And then they divide the the cars into at least 5 lanes, and they have these volunteers, taking your appointments, putting the confirmation number in your yard, in your window, and then they give you a test. Then you do the test yourself, and then you drop it off. And while you're waiting, you have Mayor Garcetti giving you instructions in English and Spanish as to how to do the exam. So it was pretty interesting to see and sort of go through that experience. Like, oh, I never thought I would be, getting tested with all these people in a Dodger Stadium.
So if you got into the wrong line because everyone's in cars, it's hard to get out of it until you get to a certain point. So you have to wait there.
Yeah, because the thing that saved us was that my other sister-in-law went and got tested too. So she let us know that the best way to go is through Academy Road,
Okay,
so north of the stadium. So that's where we went. So by the time we went to the parking lot, it was a short line versus
here
coming
it is.
from the 110, and because everybody was coming from the
Stadium
110,
way.
so the yeah, stadium way. So everybody was just kind of there.
Oh,
But
so
yeah,
if
as
you,
you know, so as people know, here in LA, it's all about trying to figure out a shortcut to avoid being in traffic.
yeah, Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
And what was the wait like? How long from beginning to end? How long did it take you?
4 hours, it was not bad. I think 4 hours, it was probably about half an hour. It moved fairly quickly. Um,
Wait, you
but I
said
think the people who were in the longer line were there at least longer than us, at least an hour
okay.
longer than
So you
us.
were there 30 minutes. That's it.
Well, 30 minutes wait and then probably like another 15 minutes to do the test and all that stuff. So yeah, about an hour or so.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad that they opened it up to do testing. And do you know if any other facilities opened up?
Well, actually,
In,
this week, because of the increase in cases out here in the east side, I know they opened one up in Supervisorial District 1. I know Supervisor Hilda Solis announced some of the new testing that's happening here in East LA, down by the Southeast LA or Stella,
mm-hmm.
because I think unfortunately there's a lot of transmission out there because a lot of the residents, mostly Latino, mostly essential workers, who need to go out there and expose themselves are the ones that are, I think, driving the high numbers.
Yeah, this time around it is. At first it wasn't here in LA in California. We were doing fine, but then this second wave is hitting particularly, like you said, these areas is hitting them particularly hard. Specifically this segment of the population. So something shifted between the way that it was being handled the first time or the way that people were approaching it versus now.
Yeah, and I think the statistic is that Latinos and Blacks are three times a higher risk of being infected, and then twice as much likely to pass away from it. And I know that a lot of it has to do with the obviously the disparities, institutional racism about who has access to healthcare, who has access to food, all that stuff. But yeah, it's sad because I mean it's really devastating the communities. So I know the old saying was, if white America got a cold, black America got the flu
The
or
flu.
the influenza. Like obviously that's kind of what's happening here with coronavirus.
Yeah. I had a feeling that things were going to have to shut down again. And this week I got the email. It may have been last weekend that I got the email from the gym that it was closing back up.
Hmm.
And then some restaurants had just started opening and now they're going to have to close again, at least dine in. Outdoors, it seems it's still okay. And now you have some areas that are making it mandatory to wear masks. Not here in California, but you see those struggles going on in other states.
They
So
are, and you remind me, I need to go cancel my gym subscription. And I was good, people. I was looking buff. I was losing weight,
yeah.
but coronavirus got in my way.
Well, you don't have to cancel it now because they'll suspend the charges.
But will I go back though?
Yeah, so you don't think you're going to go back to the gym even after it opens, after everything goes to back to whatever normal is going to be after this?
Well, I don't know, right? Because as someone who tested positive, I guess the other question that I have is, can I get infected again? And and if I get infected again, obviously it'll probably be a different or stronger,
Mm-hmm.
a mutated string of it. And would it be even more complications? So I think in the back of my mind, I do have that. And
You'll
then
be
it's also
like,
like,
sorry, you'll be like Bolsonaro from Brazil twice.
yes, thank you for talking about our boy Bolsonaro. Fala sério, rapaz. Eu não quero, but that's the problem. I think he's been following the same treatment as your president. But it's interesting because he did get it, but again, I wonder. I think he's still not taking it seriously, and I think because of him not taking it seriously, Brazil is a lot of their response has also been not the best response. Okay.
All right, so let's go back. So yeah, so great to hear that everything came back clean for you. That that And by the way, why did you feel the need to get retested? That's something that I've been hearing from some colleagues that I have in the medical profession, that people, they keep telling people that they don't need to get retested, but that people are adamant about wanting to get tested.
Yeah. I think part of it was to know that I it wasn't still active in me and that I could then sort of at least see close family, right? So to know that I we can okay now we can see go back into our previous bubble of close family. So I think that's one well that was the main reason to just confirm that we were not
Yeah.
actively infected.
So you weren't following the guideline that usually within 10 to 14 days after infection, you're no longer contagious, because you wanted another test just to make sure that you had it in writing, that you had a test telling you that you were okay now.
That's right.
Had it been 15, 20 days, you still would have had taken
Oh,
the test,
um,
or maybe
no,
30
because I
days.
think that was the other thing. I know it took time. It took some time once I developed the symptoms to go through that stuff, and I know the you're no longer I guess suffering from it after you go 3 days without symptoms. But again, because my symptoms were so mild, I wasn't sure. Okay, am I over? Am I not? Do I still have it? So I think that was the other reason I wanted to get tested.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to understand what's going on with the people that want to get retested. Because, like I said, it sounds like there's a big percentage of people that opt for a retest, even though it's not necessary, and maybe even
Yeah.
not recommended. Also, from what I hear. So
That's true, and I know that they're trying to prioritize testing in those communities and areas that really need it.
this,
So
you were
yeah, you
talking,
make a good point.
you were just talking about our communities suffering from a lack of testing, and Latinos and blacks suffering the most, and here you are getting two tests.
Two tests, like I won two. I won it all.
How
Hey,
does
it's
that
a
make
very
you feel?
American. No, yeah, let's talk about the guilt. I think that I do feel some guilt in some ways being a Latino who has made it, right? And someone who can work from home and who can afford to have groceries delivered, who can afford to get things shipped from Amazon and other retailers and things like that. So yeah, so I think that's the weird thing about uh, this pandemic and also being in this situation that that there's so many people who are suffering and yet you for the most part are okay, right? And you're better than okay. So I think in some ways you and actually I had this exact thought yesterday because we were seeing some of the coverage of how people are really struggling not only here in the US but in Latin America and some other parts where there's really there's even less of medical infrastructure and less work opportunities, less of a health safety net, less of foundations and food banks who could provide food. So just realizing that there's so much suffering, and that yet myself and my family are one of the lucky ones that can can weather their storm.
Yeah, you said it best. Being able to afford to do these things, to order from Amazon, because these days everyone orders from Amazon, right? But whether or not you can afford it, that's it's a different, totally different story. Because people might be ordering, but it's going on the credit card, and that credit card's not getting paid. So people
Yeah,
have access to those things; they just can't really afford them.
yeah, no, and I think I wanted to share that's something that I definitely think and feel. But I think at the same point, the other piece of this is realizing that it's not sort of our fault as individuals, right? It's also about the government. And this is one of those instances where you want the government, you expect the government to provide the testing. And one of the reasons we went into a shelter in place and for the first time was to give the government, to give the public health system an opportunity to set up, to get the testing, to get the material, and do all that things that need to be done. And I think the other related COVID related news that happened this week is the fact that the Trump administration is now asking hospitals to report the data instead of going to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, who is really the agency, the governmental agency who has the experience in tracking these things and sending that information to the Department of Health and Human Services, to a portal that was done by a private contractor, and that obviously brings up a lot of issues. So I think that unfortunately, it seems like the Trump administration is changing a critical piece of how we as a society can understand, and particularly our experts can understand what's happening and how they can inform and make decisions to help us combat this thing.
Yeah, just one more. Just add it to the list of one more inadequate responses in terms of overall how they've dealt with this pandemic, this administration.
Yes, I hope people are keeping track. So come November 3rd, they know how to vote.
What was the second thing that we were going to cover today?
Oh, so today we were going to talk about Walter Mercado.
Part
Finally
two.
got a chance to watch the Netflix documentary called Mucho, Mucho, Mucho Amor. So I'm ready to discuss a little bit more about Walter Mercado. Did you get a chance to finish it?
Yeah, I did watch the whole thing, and I'm interested to get your reaction to it. I think I
Yeah.
spoke a little bit about it last week, or it was fresh in my mind, but I want to get your take on it.
Yeah. And by the way, before we continue this conversation, let's just give you all a spoiler alert. So hopefully you still watch it. Um, but just since we're going to be talking about it, we may say things that ruin it for you, or just give you a little bit more context as you get ready to enjoy this great piece of work. So yeah, so I think for me it was great to see it, very informative. I think as I shared last week, Walter Mercado and his segment and the time I spent with my mom and how it became sort of a little tradition. I didn't realize how big and how shared that experience was across not only the United States but across Latin America and across the world, really, because I didn't realize he had a such a world appeal. And it was good to kind of get a sense that a little bit learn more a little bit about his journey, because I really didn't know much about Walter Mercado until he got to Primer Impacto. So appreciating his coming up story. And it was interesting, to your point, the time that he spent in dancing and acting and all those things that give him that flair. But I also found it interesting, that whole thing about him being almost like a niño prodigio, right? Like being
Hmm.
someone who I guess was able to breathe life into a little bird, and somebody saw that, and he kind of became a miracle worker in his community.
Yeah,
So
which
that was
I
interesting
can
to see.
totally relate to, because I can see that happening in any small town across Latin America.
Hmm. Yeah, so the fact that he was a Jiwaro and he was able to, you know, he was able to. I mean, I guess that's a pretty, no, understanding that makes a good gives you a good sense for how he would later become such a an adored figure within the Latino community, and I guess also elsewhere, because little by little, I think people discovered him, and I think his journey, right, his how he sort of developed his style. And I like how the documentary does talk about the other piece we were talking about, how people, obviously he developed such a distinctive style, and then there were people who made fun of it, like Eugenio Derbez
Hmm.
and so many other people, and they actually did it to maliciously, right, to make fun
Yeah.
of whether or not he was gay or homosexual or whatever. So I think it was also good to see the documentary capture that.
Well, that's the thing, that he was ambiguous, misunderstood, and I don't think people really knew what to do with it. and so
Hmm.
the best thing that they know how to do is to ridicule it and to make fun of how he's expressing himself. But that's also one of the things that I feel the documentary didn't really do a good job of exploring is Walter Mercado's sense of identity. Like
Hmm.
what really, because they didn't probe that area. They didn't ask him, are you homosexual? Are you gay? Are you ambiguous? How do you identify? And they didn't talk about his mindset to get to an understanding of him as an individual that is was acting that way just because he that was just normal to him, or if he was trying to make a statement, or if he was comfortable, or right, because I get the impression that to him that's just the only way that he knew how to be.
Hmm.
Not that at some point he decided that he has been repressed and that he has to really go out there and make a statement. I didn't get that sense from him. I got the sense that this guy's just that's just who he is. He's just kind
Hmm.
of quirky, eccentric, and he likes to be free and express himself however he wants to. And he just so happens that maybe we don't know if he likes men or women. Maybe he right. It's so strange, but I get the sense that he was just very comfortable with himself and how he expressed the way that he dressed, the way that he communicated, that he interacted. It wasn't just a stage persona. That's just really who he was in his whole life. And it's not something that he developed later on in life. Maybe even when he was a kid, one of the reasons why they saw that he was a curandero or that he had these powers is because he was probably a really quirky little kid.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, hey, there's something odd about that kid. Oh, he just cured a bird. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Weird, strange, nobody understands him, and he cures things. Yeah, that it must be true. He must have some type of power.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think the fact that he, yeah, I mean, I think and he even said it himself that he always felt like he was, he had something special about him. And then the fact that he was an actor and that he was a dancer, I think also talked about his creative ability and his ability to perform, right? And to get into character and to understand those elements. And then
But
the
see,
other interest,
but you said to get into character, but I have this sense that when the cameras were no longer rolling, that was still him. He didn't take off the cape and the Count Dracula the Count Dracula outfit, and then he just went back to being like, "Hey, qué onda, cabrón? ¿Cómo estamos?" Now I'm
yeah.
back. I'm no longer Walter. No, I feel like he just transitioned whatever he that role. I don't know if there was any transition at all. I just think he put on the cape and then that was Walter Mercado. Or do you think there was more to it than that?
Um, I don't know. I think there might have been a little bit more to it than that, but then at the same time, it also seems like he fell into that role of being a a public astrologer. It was almost like an accident, right? He was asked to come and do a segment, which became really popular. And I guess he just did it off the cuff that first time, and then it became so popular that Puerto Rican station got so many calls that they started having him every day. So I think there was some sense of intentionality on his part. But you're right. I think that he was just who he was, and that I think that he was just expressing that, and then he was able to express that in a more um, when he was in public. Obviously, he did it more, and I think and one of the things that was hard for me to see was to see after not seeing Walter for a number of years, then to kind of see him so old and and see him like so deteriorated. That was tough for me. I kind of felt bad, but also it's nice because I felt like, oh, he's kind of like my abuelito, right? He's going through that process, but he's still, you can still see that he still takes care of his image, of how he comes across. So it was good to kind of, also it was sad but also good to kind of see him in that way too, since I hadn't seen him for so long.
Yeah, he had a lot of work done, a
Yes.
ton of work, and it's so much work that you get to a point where they all look the same.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the injections on the lips, the whatever they do to their cheeks to lift them a little bit, and then the stretching of the skin, the Botox. At a certain point, the eyes start closing up, like if they're squinting, then the
Mm-hmm.
lips puff up a bit. So yeah, he has that look that I'm sure other people are familiar with by now, with celebrities that have overdone it a bit with the facial enhancements, let's call them.
The Hollywood look.
Yeah, but one of the reasons why I think that, and I'm using this to build a profile of the real Walter Mercado, and I'm using this another data point that I'm using it to corroborate my theory that that's just who he was, that he was just different his whole life. The way that he managed his finances, and this is where the spoiler alert comes in,
Mm-hmm.
that he was very naive, that he 100% trusted the business people around him, and in particular,
His
that
manager, yeah.
yeah, his manager, uh, completely naive to give him 100% trust and sign a contract without even reading it. And I suppose you could say not very savvy with the business side. He just wasn't. He's dumb for doing that stuff. But I really do think that the guy was just the immersed in the artistic side of him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain naivete that comes with that, to the point where people around him found it easy to exploit him. And
Mm-hmm.
the manager was just the one person that happened to be right next to him and saw, hey, I could really take this guy for all he has. And so it's more recent in your memory. Why don't you give us just a little context into what happened there so we can talk about that?
Yeah, so I think that as he was becoming famous, I think in Puerto Rico in particular, I think that this manager, I think it was Bill Bolka was his name. Sort of, he was young, but he was able to I guess get his trust, and then in some ways he was kind of behind getting Walter into Primer Impacto, which
Mm-hmm.
catapulted him into a larger limelight, and then also to an international, right? An international, doing international appearances, and then doing the sidekick line in English, that's the thing. I think I also felt like Walter was able very easily to move from English to Spanish, so
Mm-hmm.
I think that helped his crossover appeal. So I know they have a funny segment there with when he goes to the Howard Stern show
Yeah.
to talk about who he is and what he does. But in any case, I think that to your point, yes, I think he was very much a creative person, maybe more concerned about his 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 act, his astrology, that stuff he trusted. And I think at the same point, I think he also trusted Bill because he was the one that had helped them get so far and sort of gotten his career into that trajectory. So he figured, you know what, he's a friend. He helped me get to where I'm at. Why is he gonna why is he gonna do me wrong? So I
But
trust him. So I
well,
think there's also I think a natural thing that I think we will all would do if our manager or somebody we care about helped us to get. So I think there will be a level of trust that unfortunately he took advantage of. I mean, to sign away your ability to use your name and to use all the content and all the things that you did and you worked so hard to. That was just crazy,
yeah,
and that was the reasons why he was taken out of Primer Impacto.
he signed away the rights to his name, to his image, to his likeness, to his works, to anything related to the Walter Mercado persona. And see,
Hmm.
that's the problem. So here's a guy that's very artistic, that is a bit naive, and it's not uncommon for artists to get exploited by their management companies or individuals managing them. But Walter Mercados is unique even within that group, because he signed away everything. I mean, most of the time, if you go back to the 60s and the early history of rock and roll, a lot of those artists, yeah, they were being taken advantage of because they weren't making nearly enough that they should have. It was just the manager was making most of the money and then giving them scraps. But Walter Mercado lost everything. It wasn't even just, we can't even say that he got a shady deal where he wasn't getting paid enough. No, he signed everything away, so he had nothing. And so he had this guy Bill Bakula in the interview. He says, "I don't have any regrets for what I did." Walter Mercado had people advising him, and I think he at some point mentioned that it was family members that were advising him, that were giving him legal
Hmm.
advice. So okay, so maybe Walter on his own is a bit naive and he trusts this guy 100%. But don't you think there would have been people around him that would have been advising him to, like, hey, even at least advising him to, in some way, to do things that are beneficial for himself? And I don't know the situation with the contract, if anybody else apart from Walter knew that that contract had been delivered, but to not even read the contract, to just
Well, there
sign
was
it. Yeah.
what he mentioned that there was an attorney, and it wasn't clear whether it was an attorney that Walter had hired or that maybe Bill had to work with too, who said that, oh yeah, this looks pretty good. You should be able to sign it. So I think I do remember that there was some sort of lawyer, and I think Bill even references that. Well, his advisor, he had legal advice to help him do that. But and then to your point on the people around him, I think that it seemed like he really just had his nieces, which seemed to be a really interesting bunch of Puerto Rican women, obviously very loving, but it's
Who,
funny to.
yeah. They seem to follow in his footsteps too.
Yes, I know there were at least two that seemed to be all dressed up like that and kind of taking advantage of I guess, the family image and the family business. But then the other one that I wanted to talk about was his assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was kind of heartbreaking because you can kind of tell that they were partners, but that he claims that he never touched Walter, but
Mm-hmm.
there's really but obviously you can tell that there were life partners, that he had been there. But I think he was more responsible for his capes, for his looks, obviously doing whatever needed to get done to prepare him, but I don't think he advised them or was in a position to advise him around legal matters.
And also, with regards to the assistant, it's also a bit tragic that if in fact they were partners, that even in this documentary, even at this age, they still didn't feel comfortable enough to just make
Yeah,
it public and say all along we've been partners. They
yeah,
still, they're still stuck in the environment that they may have grown up in, where had they said that, they would have felt shame, or they would have felt that there would be some type of repercussion. So I hope that they were just friends, that they were that friends in a sense that maybe they had and they understood each other, that there was more than just a friendship, but not to the level where they were actually, when the cameras aren't rolling, that it's a partnership. Because he seemed also more like his servant, like his Alfred. When I looked at it, I was like, man, Walter Mercado has his own Alfred. So
hmm,
if it was more of that type of relationship where one is a caretaker of what, if really, if his role was that of the caretaker, then that seems fine. But if the camera stop rolling and that role changes and all of a sudden they're both equal and they're just partners, and they couldn't make that public in this documentary, then that is in a way tragic that they
it
still
is.
felt that they couldn't.
It is very tragic, and I think the documentary does gets a little bit into a sort of the impact that he had on some, gay LGBT youth, Spanish-speaking youth who saw him on TV, and some way they felt, oh, there's somebody who kind of represents me. So there was that piece, but also the fact that there's a reason why Walter didn't, similar to what um, blanking on his name, Juan Gabriel, didn't
Hmm.
sort of expressly come out, was because there was that fear that if they would have come out, I'm gay, I'm bisexual, I'm whatever, then the hate and the acceptance would have been the ability not to, it would have tanked their careers, right? So I think that that's the other sad piece that is also included in the touched upon briefly on the documentary.
Yeah, look at him here. Like, both of them totally super fabulous, right?
Yes.
I mean, it. I don't know. Was there any? I didn't see any proof in the documentary that beyond enough to give people suspicion that they're partners, but I didn't see anything concrete. So, did you see anything?
I mean, the fact that they've been together for so long and some of the pictures do look like, boyfriend and girlfriend or boyfriend and boyfriend in this case.
But
Um,
so you think that when no one's around, that role of caretaker, um, butler changes, and they're both equal and they're just partners, and they went through this whole facade that they put together in front of the camera to make it seem like Willie is just the guy that takes care of Walter.
yeah, but I think, and obviously it's hard to speculate over their relationship and what actually happened, but I think the other part is that it is Walter Mercado. It's a figure that's larger than life. So I don't know if there was an equal partnership. Maybe it was more like, he's Walter. Um, I'm his partner, his assistant, and this is my role. My role is to make sure that he has what he needs when he was working, that he had the capes, he had all that stuff, but then that he also, as he got old, that he was taking his medications and all the supplements that he had to take. And reason in part, and we forgot to mention that as he dealt with the legal repercussions and trying to get back his name, it took him like 6 years. It probably took him a lot of his money, a lot of his wealth and resources, and then also it took his health because shortly after he had a heart attack, and I think that's when his health complications began.
Right. And just one last thing about the partner. What I was trying to say earlier is that if their relationship was sexual in nature, that they were partners, then it's a little harder in that case to still have the type of relationship where um, Willie is the one that's constantly looking out for Walter. And in that sense, they're both looking out for each other.
Hmm.
But in the documentary, Walter seemed very comfortable letting this guy cater to him and serve him and bring him his food and give him his medication. So that to me seems like the more natural type of relationship that they had.
Hmm.
That maybe to this day or till the end, they both lived in a sort of closeted way, like an implicit understanding that there was something more there, but they were comfortable with the arrangement that they had.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if they're partners in sexual in nature and then they just made up this whole role for the documentary, then that sucks. To me, well, whatever it was, I'm not, that's not the concern for me. The concern is that whatever partnership they had, I just, as long as they could be honest or feel that they could be honest with the world about it. That's what's really
Hmm.
more important.
Yeah, that's true. And I think to that point, I think maybe they were from they are from a other generation, and I think they also maybe felt, you know what, it's none of their business. There's no need for for them to know what happens within our house, within our association. So,
Yeah.
como dice, ¿a quién le importa lo que
Let,
yo haga?
let's go back to the Bill Bakula, the manager, because yeah, right.
Boo.
Well, the guy said he had no remorse.
Yeah.
He agreed to do the documentary, knowing full well how that was going to make him look, and he didn't back down. He said, "Look, he's an adult. He signed these contracts, and he agreed to sign all his rights away to me." But what I was thinking was, well, how stupid do you have to be to kill your cash cow? Because essentially that's what he did. So
Yeah.
Walter could no longer perform because he didn't even own his rights. So I imagine that at some point Walter couldn't sign any agreements. He couldn't get into any type of agreement with any other party without going through this guy, because this guy Bill Bakula owned all the rights to Walter. So Walter just said, "Well, I'm not going to do that because any type of performance that I do, I have to go through this manager that owns all my rights, and he'll just pay me like an employee, and he'll give
Mm.
me nothing. I will have not. I'll make very little. So Walter decided to just whatever existing partnerships he had, like with Primer Impacto, he could no longer operate those, and he couldn't get new ones. So how stupid you have to be as a manager to become so parasitic in a way, if we could
Mm.
use that metaphor, become
Ooh.
so parasitic that you've killed your host instead of being a parasite that lives in symbiosis with your host and gets wealthy and lives and feeds off of Walter, because he could have easily structured the contract in such a way that Walter could have still kept going and he would have been performing till he passed away, and this guy could have made a ton of money, right? Because
Yeah.
Walter Mercado is he's still relevant, but you don't see this guy making a fortune out of or that he made a fortune in that brief period of time when he did own the rights to Walter Mercado's name.
Yeah, I think he tried, it sounded like he tried to repurpose and republish some of Walter's old content and old
Yeah.
things. But yeah, you're right. So, and I don't know enough about Bills and who he was working, who else was he working with. But yeah, it does seem like it was something that it was it wasn't the right thing to do, but it was a dumb thing to do too. Um, Given that how well things were going,
Yeah.
for both Walter and for him,
Yeah, he got too greedy.
he did.
Yeah, you're not, you're a parasite. You're not supposed to kill the host.
Yeah, and the fact that he sort of, and then I think the psychic hotline, I know that that seemed also to go against Walter's reputation, because I think that once you get into that play of really taking advantage of people in desperate situations, I think that I know that that brought issues to Walter's image, and I think Walter did it just because, oh, well, this is Bill is telling me this is the right thing to do, this is a smart thing to do. Let me do that. And not to say that Walter, because I think Walter defended it too. So yeah, but it was interesting to get a little bit go behind the curtain of the phenomenon that was Walter Mercado.
And you forgot to mention Lin Manuel Miranda.
Yeah, that was interesting because I guess it's cool. I guess Lin Manuel Miranda is our age, so we can relate to him. But the fact that he also grew up with him and that he was so excited to meet Walter. And I think I read somewhere that maybe Lin Manuel Miranda's sort of image and prestige also helped the documentary get the wide appeal that it has gotten. But I think it was exciting to kind of just see him as a very, genuinely like a little boy, very excited to meet Walter Mercado, and it was cool when he put on that fancy Puerto Rican cape that Walter had, um, and to know that that was part of his life too, as it was to so many of us Latinos here in the U.S., Latinos and Latinas,
Yeah,
Latinx.
he seemed generally starstruck when he was
Yeah,
around Walter, and then but there was mutual admiration there because you could tell that
yeah,
Walter was very familiar with his works.
yeah,
So yeah, that was a nice piece to the documentary, because I think in a way it allowed the way that Lin Manuel Miranda reacted when he saw Walter. I think it would have been a similar reaction from someone like yourself or all the other Latinos that grew up
yeah,
that same age group. So I think he gave you guys that so that you could
yeah,
feel that you can, in a way, share that experience by way of Lin Manuel Miranda.
yeah. No, so true. And then the other element obviously is Lin Manuel Miranda. And just a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about his amazing work with Hamilton and all that stuff and the Heights. I know that the movie was supposed to come out this summer, but got postponed to next year. But I think for me, I feel that Puerto Rico has this amazing ability to produce these incredible artists, right? Like, and I know many other countries do as well. I know Mexico, Colombia, etc. Go down the line, But I just feel there's this special thing about this island of only about 4 million people that that both whether you're born there or you are part of the Puerto Rican diaspora here in the States, that there's a lot of talent and creativity. So in Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hector Lavoe, Walter Mercado, when you think of Daddy Yankee, and talking about someone who had the opportunity to have a very different way to express his sexuality and coming out was Ricky Martin.
Hmm.
Obviously, how can we forget about Bad Bunny Bebe? Bad Bunny
Ricky
Bebe.
Martin does not age.
He does not. And it's funny because there was this meme about, uh, you
Míralo.
know,
Well, I'm sure this is when he was younger, but still looks young. 48. Wow. He's not even that old, actually.
no, not at all.
It reminded me when you mentioned In the Heights that I went to see this play when I lived in New York. And
Yes, wasn't it was good.
yeah, I think I had a friend that had gone to visit from California, and she's the one that wanted to go see it. I suppose when you visit New York, you look up the things that you need to do while you're there, and
Hmm.
I don't know if she was a longtime fan of Lin Manuel when she got there, or if she had just seen that if you're in New York, you must see this play. So yeah, I remember we
Hmm.
went to see it. I thought it was good. I was never a huge fan of plays, but it's more of a dumb reaction that I have when I think about plays because once I get there and I sit down and I watch them, I really enjoy them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I think that is an acquired taste, but I think this particular play in my mind was one of the best. Well, and I'm similar to you. I wasn't really too much into plays. I was like, oh, that's dumb. Why am I want to watch a play if I can watch a movie, a well-produced movie? But obviously, there's something about being able to act live and how they able to use, excuse me, um, props to transition and sort of bring the story to life, right? And the acting. So it's really good acting that I've come to appreciate in person plays. But I thought that was one of the best plays ever as it related to my story and the stories that it covered, the music. So in my mind, I was like, there's no way Lin Manuel Miranda can do anything that's better than this. Like
Hmm.
that's it. Like he's with this play he can retire and not do anything else. And obviously, little did I know that he had a couple of things under his sleeve.
Yeah, I didn't know. That was my introduction to him, and I don't know if I even knew his name when I was watching the play, but I do remember that he stood out, and I thought, okay, this is a good caliber quality play. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect when I was going in there, so I was pleasantly surprised when I saw the cast, when I saw how good the play was, when I saw the music. And so I thought this is great if these people, because I didn't know at the time either that he had been the main architect of the play, but I thought if whoever's putting this play together, if they can keep doing plays like this, then that'll be good overall. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, sorry, just remember that. Anyway, just a little back in time in the heights. I think it'd be good to watch this again at some point if there's a chance.
Yeah, well, the movie hasn't come out. I do have the soundtrack, one of the best soundtracks ever. And that's the other thing,
And
that
by yeah,
when you listen to it, you can really enjoy it.
and by the way, just for anyone that doesn't know, in the heights is a reference to Washington Heights in up in Harlem. I remember we went there once. That was my introduction to
Yeah,
bodegas.
it's just up north.
Yeah,
Pull out again.
it's like 180th or something. It's way up
Yeah, right
here.
there, Washington Heights. No, up
Oh
right
yeah.
there, Washington Heights.
We ended up because when I was in New York, the company that I was working for, there were um, one of the girls that worked there. She was Dominican, and she used to organize a lot of the community service activities for the company. And for one of those events, and the group of us started, uh, just socializing and doing things. And in one of those instances, we ended up in Washington Heights, some bar up there. And I remember that was the first time that I went into a bodega. So for somebody coming from LA, and even though I lived on the East Coast for 4 years, when you're in college, you never, going to a bodega when you're in college, that's not what you do on a regular basis. But in New York, I went in there and I was like, it was a bit weird because I didn't know what to make of it because it was,
Cultural shock or what?
well, yeah, because they were so casually doing illegal stuff.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I think they were selling beer that they weren't supposed to, and I
No.
don't know what else they were doing in the bodega. I think they were not only were they selling the beer there, they were drinking. So you walk into the bodega, you buy like a 6 pack, and right, there's like a little room to the side, and I think there were a few people that were there just hanging out, sitting there, drinking. So I don't know if I think they because they're very friendly, so they make conversation, and they're actually inviting us to drink with them. I don't know what else was going on in there. Yeah, it was a
Well,
trip though.
it's a little piece of Latin America in New York. And I think, well, yeah, I went to the Washington Heights a number of times, and growing up in the East Coast, I grew up with a lot of Dominican culture, merengue, bachata, but also the food. The food's so good. So I remember going to, I believe it was El Malecón restaurant in Washington Heights. And it was so good, so authentic. Making me miss some Caribbean food right now, Romero, because that's one of the things that I miss the most about the East Coast. Out here west, there is Cuban food, there is some other food, but obviously it doesn't have the same flavor as back east.
Now you got me curious to read a little bit more about these bodegas. What is the from your point of view, what is it that makes them like unique and the appeal of the bodegas?
Yeah, so in a place like New York or the East Coast, it's basically like a little market, right? So it was the place where you went to before to get Goya products. Ooh,
Yeah.
not anymore though. Um, So, but no, so it was kind of like a little convenience store that had the food that you needed. So bodegas are like the Latino 7-Elevens. They had, what you needed to, and then depending on the bodega, right? So the bodega could be have very simple canned food and other foods that you would utilize, condiments, and also have the beer and the American things, the American things that you expect in a 7-Eleven, and they had the Latino things, and some of them even had verduras and fresh fruits and things like that. And obviously, if the bodega became bigger or was successful, then it became a market. So, and obviously, in the market, you had more options. You even had meat and stuff like that. So, I think bodegas were just like the little place where you can get a lot of the food that you needed, and probably food that you can get in between going to the larger mercado or doing your big shopping in the weekend or whenever you did it.
Yeah, the one that we went to in the Heights, I do remember it was narrow. It was long and narrow, very small. So it's very tight space and it was like tightly packed. But you knew right away that you were somewhere else. You were transported to a different place. Even within Washington Heights, that is a
Hmm.
it is known for being predominantly a Dominican neighborhood.
Predominantly Dominican, and although the bodegas I went to up in Rhode Island where I grew up, they were Puerto Rican.
Hmm.
So I think that bodega is both Puerto Rican and Dominican. But yeah, in the Heights is all that's where the Dominicans. That's the heart of the Dominican diaspora here in the United States.
So I remember the neighborhood itself is different because it again predominantly Dominican. But when I walked into that bodega, it felt like I had been transported somewhere else because the just the how casually and how comfortable certain things or the people that were in there were doing certain things. It seems so out of place that even in LA, I you don't really see those type of things. I do. It's been a while, but here's what I remember. We were at a bar like a block down or half a block down in a corner, and I think this was one of those bars that at the time was starting to gentrify. I think at that point the gentrification was starting to move in,
Hmm.
but it was still predominantly a bar that catered to the young professional Dominicans around there. So it may have been gentrification from gentification. and we
That's the
were
best kind of gentrification
yeah.
right there.
And so I remember we were there, and my roommate at the time, he was a social worker back then, so he knew more about these communities because he was a social worker in them. So I think we bought a drink or two, and afterwards it was like, hey, let's not keep buying drinks here. Let's go over here, like a little shortcut, right? Vamos a la bodega, and I'm like, what for? And he's like, we're gonna go buy beer. I was like, well, we can just. I didn't understand. I was kind of confused. He's like, just follow me. Come on. We went into the bodega. We buy a 6 pack, and then pay for it. And the guy at the counter, or I don't know how this starts, but they offered to pop open the beer for us. So we opened the beer, and he just starts drinking it. And I was like, all right, cool. This I like this. So we started drinking the beer, and there were people there too. Like that. It was just people hanging out there, in one side of it. And so we're drinking our beer, and essentially we're just getting our buzz at the bodega because we don't want to go back to the bar to pay for overpriced drinks. We just went to the bodega and had a few drinks there. That's why I was telling you that the way that they so casually did things that are illegal, not harmful really, and right, but illegal. But I was like, damn, this is crazy.
Hey, what do you mean illegal, man? Like you can do it in Vegas. It's all relative, my friend.
Well,
It's more
the bodegas
informal.
transport you to Vegas then. Is
Yes,
that so?
Vegas and parts of Latin America, we're a little bit more permissive, where we can enjoy life a little better. Like, why not drink in the streets? Why not drink in the beach, right?
Yeah. So yeah, so that's what I
That's your
remember.
God-given right to do
And
it.
they were so welcoming, and they were like, siéntense, siéntense, vénganse. In the Dominican, I can't do the Dominican accent. He was saying, siéntense, siéntense, have a drink with us. So yeah, we sat down and we had a few beers there, and I think we spent like 30 minutes there. We were talking to the people that run the place, and some of, again, there were just random people there that happened to know the owner of the place, and they were talking to us about the bodega and about everything else, and then just having drinks. And then afterwards, we went back to the bar with our
Nice.
nice buzz at half the price
At
or
half the
a
price. There you
fraction of the
go.
price.
Yeah, I mean, and Dominican people are, if you have not had the privilege and the honor of having Dominican friends, you've been missing in your life a little bit something of of happiness, because they're among the happiest, most outgoing people. I mean, I think part of it is the music, part of it is just the ambiance. They like to also like they make fun, like a lot of Latin cultures. They like make fun of each other. They like make fun of other people's, but they're also loving, hardworking people. So this conversation makes me think about the Bodega Boys. I don't know if you have heard of them. They actually have they started out as a sort of podcast, and now they have a show. I think is it Cinemax Showtime?
Interesting.
Um, the Sucinero. So yeah, so I think one of them is African American, one of them is Dominican. So they really do a lot of cool commentary on what's going on. But it's interesting because I remember going in. I go in, at the time I went to the Washington Heights. At least one of the times I remember somebody saying that, oh yeah, DMX walks around Washington Heights, so you see him. And I was like, wait, what? DMX?
Hmm.
So it was funny because it's also that type of place where I think there's full of Dominican culture, and then it's also where there's where the Dominican and Black New York come together to an extent. And as I was saying, Dominican are awesome, and they also are, like many places in Latin America, are also have an interesting relationship with race. That actually I was watching Henry Louis Gates' documentary on blacks in Latin America that gets into the story of the history in the Dominican Republic and Haiti and all those things. But it's interesting, right? Because in some ways the the concept of being African, or being exposed to blackness,
Hmm.
in some respects is refined here in New York and Washington Heights for some, from some African Americans, for some Dominicans. I'm sorry.
Just one other story on that topic, because I know that you have to go. But the same friend that ended up that we ended up hanging out with, and the one that took us to Washington Heights a few times. On a different occasion, we were doing community service for the company that I was working for, and we were on a beach and we were doing some cleanup along the beach. This was again in New York, and I remember coming across this vase that had a lid on it, and it was wrapped in cloth, and it had rope tied around it.
Okay.
So it seemed to have washed off onto the beach. And I remember coming across it and I lifted it and it was heavy. I was like, wait, what is this? And so I saw that obviously there's something in there. So I start taking it apart.
Oh my God.
So you already know, right? So I didn't know, right? So I undid the rope and then I took the cloth, I unwrapped it from the cloth, and then I opened it. And then inside of it, there were like 3 or 4 little figures. And so I took them out and I was like, what the hell is this? So then I started undoing the figures too.
Oh
And
my
then
God.
and then one of them had like the mouth was covered, the eyes were shut, and they had like pins in them. So I'm looking at this stuff and look, honestly, dude, I had no clue. So you have to understand, right? My mom was an outcast from the Catholic religion and from a lot of those things. So she raised us with the Christian upbringing. So we were
Well, that's not
never.
Catholic though.
I'm sorry.
That's not Catholic.
I,
That's
I I
Santeria.
know it's Santeria, but I think that you would usually find it in specific circles of people that you hang out with, that you congregate with.
Yeah.
Among them, if you if you congregate with the main society, at some point you're gonna come across that. But since my mom was a bit of an outcast from that, I never had any exposure to that. So I had no clue. Because, for example, look, Catholics, they put eggs under the bed. They rub eggs on, when a kid is sick, they rub eggs on them and then they put it under a bowl with milk and they put it under the bed. They do crazy stuff like that, right?
Well, I think those practices are a little bit of synchronismo, so a
Yeah,
little
dude,
of
but come on, like to me
of
it's the same.
breaking.
To me, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but what I'm saying is that I didn't even know that stuff because the way when I grew up, I had kind of heard of that about that stuff. Even rubbing an egg and putting it under the bed. I don't have any personal experience with it. I just know that my aunt or like my uncle's wife does that. But at my house, that none of that stuff
Yeah.
was talked about. Nobody did it. So here I am unwrapping these dolls, and I'm like, what the. Like, what are these things? This is amazing. Like, so who would wrap dolls? And I thought I was trying to assign some
Logic.
yeah, some logic and some meaning to it. Who does? And then the Dominican girl, I went and showed it to her, and she was like, "Oh, no, 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 no."
Rightfully so, man. You were like messing with somebody's magic, and
Dude,
who knows if you got some bad juju.
she freaked out because her sister had been had come to participate in the community event as well. And I remember showing it to them, and they both literally freaked out. They told me, Ulises, deja eso. Ulises, deja eso donde está. Ahí deja eso. No, 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 no. Vámonos, vámonos, vámonos. And then that's when it clicked. I was like, oh, fuck. This is like voodoo.
Hmm.
Some type of voodoo thing. And somebody's casting a spell on this. It was a family. It was like 4 of them.
Damn.
And she told me to leave it open. And I was like, well, but why? I was like, I didn't believe in any of that stuff anyway. But she was like, but they were like genuinely petrified. They
Yeah.
were like, and they wanted to run as far away as they could from there. And but then I started thinking like, but wait a minute though, I've messed with this stuff. Shouldn't I go back and fix it? They're like, no, 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 no.
Then you're gonna get implicated.
Yeah, so that was that was definitely I suppose it's a bit of ignorance on my part that I just didn't know anything about that. I had never been exposed to it. And so
Mm.
afterwards I started reading more about it and really understanding how deep that goes in the culture and
Yeah.
how people there are people that do stuff like that because again, this is in my early 20s. It's just kid in LA. I just hadn't been exposed to any of that. So it was a genuine trip.
That's funny. I just imagine. I think that story. I just imagine being like a good like Netflix show of somebody who. And it's funny because you did it so innocently, right? Like you didn't know what it was. I thought that maybe you're gonna find a message or something, but the fact that you found some dolls and stuff, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, at some point, I started. I think even before I showed them, I started thinking like, like, this is really interesting. There's something's going on here. Let me show it to to my Dominican friends, see what they think. Anyway,
Acuérdate que la curiosidad mató al gato.
right.
¿Y quién es? El gato volador. El gato
I
volador.
think that's a good segue into our to end the show.
Yes.
When the gato volador appears, you know it's time to go home.
El gato volador, that's it. Yes, so as always, we invite you to follow us here on our YouTube channel, Brown Perspective, or also on our Instagram or Twitter, Brown Perspective TV at the end, so we can continue to have a dialogue and stay connected. So thank you so much for listening to us. Let us know what you think. If you have any questions, topics that you want us to get into.
Okay, hasta luego.
Ciao, ciao.